Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to hold leaders accountable and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
And welcome, everybody, to Kentucky's Voice. That's right. If you recognize the voice, that means it is the day you get Andrew Cooperrider, your favorite host. And I'm not just saying that because I am me, but I'm saying that for you. So if you could do me a favor and just, I don't know, write letters to the station, just telling them how much you love me, that would be fantastic. It would help my fragile ego. But today on Kentucky's Voice, we'll be digging into a few different topics. Beshear has weighed in on the driver's licensing issue. And surprise, surprise, he wants the power. Give me more power. I want the power. That's what Beshear has said. He is fighting the legislators on returning it to the counties. We'll be discussing that. Also, the Minnesota school shooter, transgender shooter, has a tie here to Louisville. Something I explored on my own show that you can check out right here on 970 Sundays at 6 p.m. That is the Andrew Cooperrider Show, Sundays at 6 p.m. If you tuned into that, you heard me already mention it, but I got some pushback on that. I got some people saying, look, you don't know what's going on, Andrew, but oh boy, do I. And I'm bringing the receipts. But before I dig into those fantastic shows that you definitely want, fantastic story, you definitely want to stick around for, well, you should go ahead and reach out to the station as you hear me talk today. You can shoot us a text at 502-571-0970. Once again, that's 502-571-0970, 502-571-0970. If you want to text the show, if you want to join into the conversation, because this first story, I'm not starting off with those two. Instead, we're going to start off with the idea that there's no such thing as a free lunch. In fact, when government gets involved, there's no such thing as a cheap lunch either. It can't be cheap, can't be free. It's not their money. They're going to find the most expensive way they can to feed people lunch. And I bring to you this, okay? So just this past month, the legislature approved a contract for the Kentucky's Attorney General's office. So this is all Republicans I'm talking about here. You know, in this show, at least when I'm hosting, and I know several of the other hosts here on Kentucky's Voice, we calls them as we sees them. And when the Republicans mess up, we're going to call that out, just like we'll call it out when the Democrats mess up. And in this case, the Kentucky's Attorney General's office, for their symposium they're having here in Louisville regarding opioids. They're having an opioid symposium. This is their second year doing it, where they sit and they talk about opioids. And a lot of this has to do with and is tied to this settlement we got. We've gotten several settlements of hundreds of millions of dollars from these drug companies in order to pay for the damages they have caused with the opioid epidemic here in Kentucky. And Kentucky's been heavily affected by this, and the money is supposed to go towards preventing these kinds of things. And a part of that, and using that money and using it in a way to really kind of fight the drug epidemic, this opioid symposium put on by the Kentucky Attorney General's office it was started up in order to help connect the community and come up with great ideas in order to deal with this drug epidemic. And I have no issue with that concept as a whole. I have no issue with the idea of gathering people together to deal with a problem that truly is the scourge of our time. How many people's potentials and opportunities have been stolen by opioids? How much has our own communities, you walk around downtown, you don't feel safe, people laying on the streets. Well, they're taking some steps on that, but you see it all the time, these encampments and homeless encampments and people digging through trashes and all these other things, people staying on the side of the road, holding a sign, asking you for money. That gets annoying. I get it. It's almost as bad as the baristas that just poured you a cup of black coffee and then flip around and say, hey, just a few questions, and then it's a tip, and they want 20% for literally putting a black coffee into a cup. It's almost as annoying as that. These guys standing around with signs wanting money for just standing out in the sun, I guess. And so we should take steps to fight that. I have no issue with that. I have no issue with the symposium as a whole. What I have an issue with is the catering contract for the symposium that starts in the morning. So to be clear, the people coming to this should have already gotten breakfast, could have already gotten breakfast. Then it ends at like 6 o'clock. So easily time for them to get dinner on their own. And it's not like the symposium super expensive either. It takes place over 2 days, and the participants are paying $50, so $25 a day to take part in it, to register for it. So it's not like it's like a giant expense to them either. It's very reasonable that you'd have to provide your own breakfast and your own dinner in that kind of circumstance. It also provides some continuing education credits to people involved. But despite this, and literally based upon the schedule, it looks like they should only be providing lunch. The Kentucky's Attorney General's office is spending $67,912.50 to cater this event. Now, if we just look at how many people attended last year, 450 people attended last year. That's what they said. 450 people. That works out to $75 a person a day for lunch. $75 a person for lunch per day. That's $150 over the course of the entire symposium they're spending to feed them 2 meals. Now, I understand we need to be fighting opioids, and I understand the need to communicate and network and come up with great ideas and coordinate actions and work together across the state to defeat this scourge. What I don't understand is why we need to be eating steak and lobster for lunch while we're doing it. Now, I looked at the contract. I don't know if they're providing steak and lobster. I don't know if they're serving them Goldschlager with real flakes of edible gold in it. I don't know if that's what's going on. The contract didn't spell out exactly how many, what they were serving to the people. But going off of last year's numbers, I just ask you, this is an opioid symposium. Can we not keep as much money as we can going towards the actual treatments? What is the problem with government? We've seen this with Fayette County Public Schools. We've seen this with Jefferson County Public Schools. We dug into some of their problems. What is the problem with government and food? In private employers, they might cater a lunch occasionally, bigger companies, or if you accomplish something. Sometimes I have seen some companies that cater all the time, but they're a free market business to do it. But what has happened in our government where it's a big perk to go ahead and get a free lunch, but not just like a ham sandwich, not just fried bologna, not just, a little bit of Spam on some bread, but instead, hey, let's spend way too much, $75 a person. Why has that become so common? And they're able to get away with it. Treat yourself. You hear that in this culture all the time. It's treat yourself Saturday or treat yourself Friday, where you can go out and treat yourself, fancy meal and everything else. Well, for them, it's treat yourself every chance we get on the taxpayer's dime. More money hitting the road to accomplish these things. That's all I'm asking for. I'm not saying I disagree with the symposium. Not saying I disagree with the efforts. I'm saying that I agree with the efforts so much that I find it offensive when our government spends this kind of money to feed themselves while they're supposedly fighting opioids. And those people attending it should take a minute to look internally and say, are we spending too much on this? Are we going too far? And speaking of no free lunch now, when the state messes up, when the state might accidentally be giving you, the taxpayer, the citizens, a free lunch that you didn't fill out enough paperwork for, you didn't qualify for enough, well, they're going to come after you with the courts, because we have this story here about 1,462 families across Kentucky who were ineligible to receive EBT cards, received them in error. Okay, so what's going on here? So there's the free and reduced lunch program. And the way this works with a lot of public schools is if there's a certain percentage of the kids who qualify for free and reduced lunch, well, they go ahead and give everybody in the school free and reduced lunch. And then over the summer, they just send out these EBT cards loaded up with $150 per kid to feed the kid over the summer, I guess. Feed your children over the summer, which is kind of strange already, because if you need food stamps, you need SNAP assistance, you fill out for that, you get more money the more kids you have. It's weird that the schools have to come in and decide they're going to supplement that. But that is something that has the expansion of the free and reduced lunch program. And so they sent out accidentally these 1,462 cards, and they said, the cabinet, though, said, hey, look, don't spend that money. Don't do it. Now, they say that only 700 cards issued have been used, and only a measly $76,267 of benefits have been spent. Only 76 grand of people going ahead and receiving EBT benefits that didn't ask for them and then spending it. And they want that money back. So the state has come in and threatened these people with collections, threatened them saying, look, if you don't repay the money, if you don't send it back to us, somehow, some way, you need to write us a check. What is that, 3 kids? Well, sorry, we accidentally sent you $450. You need to write us a check or you are going to collections. That's the threat coming down. Now, so far, they've said, well, we might hold off. We might try to work with the parents on this so we don't send them to collections. But it's nice. They get to spend 67 grand on their own opioid symposiums to feed 450 people. But, when they accidentally send out EBT cards, the full weight of the government's coming down on you. Well, when we come back, we'll start digging into some of the other stories before us today. I'm Andrew Cooper Ryder. We'll see you back here in a few short minutes.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back here on Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host for the day, Andrew Cooperrider, the amazing and wonderful Andrew Cooperrider. At least that's what my wife says, so it must be true. She hasn't lied to me yet that I know of. If you want to join into the show's conversation, feel free to go ahead and text us 502-571-0970. Once again, that's 502-571-0970. I'll potentially read your texts out on air and weigh in on, give you my emotions on what you've sent over. So make sure you're shooting us that text, 502-571-0970. So this Senate race for McConnell's seat, it's been a hot, heavy one. You know, yesterday I was watching some alley cats fight each other, and I thought, well, that looks a lot like the Senate race going on here in Kentucky. The jabs, the attacks, they're coming far, they're coming fast. But one thing about this race, as far as right now, is it really hasn't been much about what we, the voters, they're not really campaigning much to we, the voters. What we're seeing from a lot of them, Andy Barr, Nate Morris, and even Daniel Cameron to a degree, is positioning themselves in order to try the best they can to get that Trump endorsement. We've seen Nate Morris coming out with ads saying, hey, I love tariffs. Trump's tariffs are great. Spending large chunks of money to circulate this tariff ad, which I've spoken about on the show before. It's kind of an odd thing. It's not so much that people view necessarily tariffs, all of them as negative or positive. It's not an 80-20 issue with Republicans. Typically, when you are campaigning, you're going to campaign on things that have vast popularity with Republicans. Tariffs have some popularity. The thing is those who really like the tariffs will say, hey, look, I like the tariffs. They're not going around and running around asking, what do you think about Trump's tariffs? But the people who are asking about what do you think about Trump's tariffs are the ones that do have strong emotions against them. And generally, when you have a topic, that the upside for it doesn't create a lot of passion, but there is a downside for it, even if it's a popular issue with a voting group that you're campaigning to, you typically wouldn't spend a lot of time or money campaigning on it. But that's what Nate Morris has done, because that is a campaign for Donald Trump. And Andy Barr's, it's the same way. I mean, and like I said, to a degree, Daniel Cameron. I mean, if you ask them, they're the Trumpiest Trumpers to have ever trumpeted. That's how they feel about it. Well, this here from Conservative Brief, it looks like Andy Barr's been hitting a few snags, and it's kind of funny why he's hitting the few snags, because he has made a lot of issue out of attacking Nate Morris over his donations to Nikki Haley. Now, if you say, well, he was donating to Nikki Haley instead of Donald Trump, that is not accurate. He actually donated to her, I believe back in 2021, when she actually made a statement that if Donald Trump was running for president, she would not jump in. So at the time that the donation was issued, it looks like Nikki Haley wasn't running for office and had actually said she wouldn't run for president. And so if you're trying to claim he donated it to Nikki Haley instead of going ahead and donating to Donald Trump, you would be mistaken. But What's funny about that, or funny issue about talking about donation history, is that according to Conservative Brief, the advisors around Trump are speaking up saying, look, Andy Barr's having some issues in the Donald Trump world. Because when we look at Andy Barr's donation history, when we look at who his PAC has given money to, because these congressmen, they'll get together a leadership PAC where they can go ahead and hand out money. It's a way of currying favor, especially if you're planning on running for something bigger. You know, for an example, you have Andy Beshear here setting up for his presidential run. He has a PAC called In This Together, which actually this year so far has raised about $1.4 million. And it's used as a way to fundraise for yourself, but also so you can donate to other candidates running for office and be able to kind of buy their loyalty, right? Buy their loyalty. Buying loyalty, that'll be a conversation we have. Well, it looks like Andy Barr's PAC has actually given money to 7 times that he's given money to House representatives, the federal level House representatives that voted to impeach Donald Trump after January 6th. In fact, Andy Barr himself was critical of Donald Trump, saying he was and had blame and wasn't free of blame from what occurred on January 6th, the January 6th riots or whatever you want to call them, saying that, hey, look, he has some guilt here. Now, granted, he did not vote to impeach Donald Trump when it came about. But when those who did vote to impeach Donald Trump, the House representatives that did that, he has given money to them. And that's just kind of fascinating to look at on the Senate side of things. Because in this race, where it's about who does Donald Trump like the most, that Andy Barr fractures there. And I've said this from the beginning. It was always risky. And we'll see how this plays out. We'll see if they end up with a double endorsement. The idea that Andy Barr gets the solitary endorsement at this point, especially with those donation issue history, I think is a long shot. And the problem for Andy Barr there, positioning himself in that way, is that he has been a moderate. He has a moderate background. He can, he could be on a 1-lane road and still find a way to take the middle of the road. Okay? He could be on a dirt path and still find the middle of that road and make sure he walks right down that middle. And when you look at his behavior around the Donald Trump impeachment after January 6th, well, a lot of what he was saying, he was taking indication from Mitch McConnell. See, the problem for many of these politicians is they simultaneously have to say something and can't say nothing. Right? They want the attention. They got to say something. They're trying to position themselves so they can be the first one. But when you get it wrong, and so many of these politicians have gotten it so wrong when it comes to Donald Trump, thinking he wouldn't be back, thinking he didn't have a chance again, thinking, oh, surely this is the end of his political career. They have gotten it wrong time and time again. And when they do, these moderates have struggled with their messaging. And so while Andy Barr is saying, I'm the Trumpiest Trumper to have ever trumpeted, he's got this background that would argue differently. You know, priorly on the show, I've talked about how Andy Barr came out against Trump's tariffing during the first term. That's part of the reason why probably Nate Morris is pushing so much on the tariffing side of things. And obviously, Nate Morris is getting a lot of play within the MAGA world, him being friends with J.D. Vance and everything else. But it just puts Barr in an interesting position where he's trying to maneuver himself out of his history. Speaking of PACs, though, and I mentioned the Andy Beshear PAC, where the In This Together, which is reported raising $824,000 just over the past few months there. So far in 2025, he's at $1.4 million. This is actually right in line with some of the other people trying to position themselves to run for that presidential spot. Obviously, Gavin Newsom is positioning himself well as well. He's capturing a lot of the national headlines. Beshear's trying to position himself as the guy who can bring over that conservative vote. I mean, he's a Democrat governor who wins in a state that goes massively for Donald Trump. I can bring them back in. That's what he has to say. Well, one of his largest donors, funny enough, is an Andrew Schwartzberg, who has dumped in so far just south of $500,000 into this In This Together PAC. $500,000. And he apparently is a real estate developer that focuses on affordable housing. Yeah, I mean, it's always good to know that the guy who is building affordable housing has $500,000 to dump into some essentially nationally no-name guy who doesn't have a chance at winning president nationally speaking. I don't think he's ready for it. I know a lot of people say, watch out for him, watch out. I don't think he has it. I don't think he can position himself and message himself properly enough in order to go ahead and win over the national Democrat vote. I mean, he just has too many, I think, background issues. He's kind of like, by positioning yourself as a moderate, the Democrats are so far left that you can't really, push yourself out there in that way. Well, coming back, we'll talk about Bashir's driver's licensing. He thinks he can handle it despite all the issues. We'll be back in a few short minutes.
Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back here on Kentucky's Voice. Host for the day, Andrew Cooper-Ryder. If you want to reach out, you want to say, hey, Andrew, I have opinions that I want to share with you. There's actually a way you can do that. You can text 502-571-0970. Once again, that's 502-571-0970. Because I know some of you are going to have opinions on this. Driver's licensing. We've talked a lot about this on the show. A lot of issues, a lot of problems. We've had a lot of problems over the last several years. Those out in the sticks have had way more problems than those necessarily in the cities, but those in the cities at the same time having problems getting appointments for a while up until recently where it's busy all over. Driver's licensing was a problem out in the sticks because they had to drive like an hour or 2 hours sometimes to get to their closest regional driver's licensing office, and that's taking a whole day off. For those in the cities, it was hard getting an appointment. Well, now everybody's just having a hard time getting an appointment, getting served on it. And so we've seen a lot of legislators coming out saying, look, we need to give this back to the counties. It was so much better when the counties handled it. Well, there's one man in this state who decided to take the hard road here and is fighting taking it back to the counties. That is our illustrious governor, Andy Bashir. He has opinions on this. I believe LEX 18, this is a outtake from them, a little story from them. Let's take a listen to that.
This week, we reported on a lawmaker's push to return the driver's license process in Kentucky back to each county. It's something many of you voiced support for online.
But this week, Governor Andy Bashir said going back now would possibly lead to years of new challenges. LEX 18's political reporter Carolina Buchek has more in tonight's big story at 5.
We need to go back to issuing those driver's licenses in each 120 county.
State Representative Savannah Maddox made her point clear last week. She wants Kentucky to get rid of its regional driver's licensing centers and return the process back to the circuit clerks in each 120 counties. But Governor Andy Beshear says the reason that the regional centers were created in the first place is because the circuit clerks didn't want to deal with real IDs.
And the real ID is so expensive to institute that you can't do it without having driver's licensing.
So the governor says the state built out this whole new program of regional centers, and he admits that he is not happy with the way things are going, but he prefers to improve things rather than go back and have to rebuild a whole other system.
I am not satisfied with the operations of our centers. My commitment is to make it work. I mean, if we send it back to the clerks now, you'd have to rebuild from scratch there. And it might be another 5 years of challenges.
The governor says these regional centers are also dealing with a lot of additional factors that are contributing to these long lines. First off, we have real IDs. People want them to be able to get on planes. And then we have the 15-year-olds. A new law was passed that allowed 15-year-olds to get their driver's permits. So that contributed to some of the lines. But the governor says the thing that's causing the longest lines is the new vision screening requirement. And a new law was passed that requires a vision test in order to renew your driver's license in Kentucky. And the governor says all of that has really contributed to long lines.
The vision screenings have increased in-person appointments dramatically. Absolutely dramatically. I mean, the numbers before and now are significant.
The governor says instead of tearing the regional system down, he hopes to add more staffing. In Lexington, Carolina Buchek, LX18 News.
And I'll deal with his excuses here in a second. I just want to first talk about his claim. His major claim of why we can't return this is, first off, it'll be expensive and hard because we have to rebuild from scratch. That makes 0 cents. 0 cents. When you think about it for like even 5 seconds, okay? So first, it's not like the system itself that they currently have. Apparently, it's not so complicated that they can just hire people from a temp agency to come do this work. That's what they've been doing. I mean, let's just go through all the problems here. Long waits, far drives, illegal immigrants getting licenses, bribery. Bribery? I mean, come on. People with not taking the driver's tests of any kind out there driving on our road, all issues caused by this entire system. He says, look, we'd have to start from scratch. Why would we have to do that? Why wouldn't we take the same computer system? Because that's what he's talking about. It's not about processes or systems because literally you just hire people locally. We used to do it. This is crazy. I know a long time ago, it was 5 years ago or so. A long time for Beshear. I get it. Hard to remember. But this used to be handled locally. So it's not the staffing thing that he's talking about. He's talking about the computer system has to be rebuilt from scratch. That's what he's claiming. Why would you need to do that? You just create logins at the county level. I'm sure one guy, there's not one guy. Is this like the like the formula to Coca-Cola or something where it's kept secret and only a few handful of people know it? There's not one person who has the administrative login to be able to add people and do administrative work at the state level, and the system can't handle other administrative logins. That's not how computer systems work. Okay, you could literally make every single county's elected official that's in charge of driver's licensing. Was it a county circuit clerk or whatever, whoever was in charge of it before? Sorry. Can't remember. But anyways, 5 years apparently was a long time ago for me. Anyways, you can just make them the admin. They just then add people. And then you just train them on the program. The same way you train the people coming in and out of the place now. You're literally hiring by definition from a temp agency, which means you have a lot of turnover. If you weren't having a lot of turnover, then you wouldn't need a temporary staffing agency. So you already have a system in place to train people. You just do that. But instead, Beshear says, you know what? We should just build more offices. How many more, huh? Should we have one in every county? Because that's what we're talking about here. And somehow it would be more expensive than it was 5-6 years ago when they were handling it themselves at the county level. And I get it. They didn't want to mess with Real ID. They didn't want to do Real ID. I don't know enough about the back end of that to know exactly why Real ID is so much harder than a regular ID. Maybe it's some sort of Department of Homeland Security check or something like that. They didn't want to implement it and go through it. But the system's built. So what's the reason why Beshear doesn't want to return it? And granted, he's got a point about why it's getting worse with the eye test. I don't think moving back permitting, a year? I don't think that's I guess it's a big deal, but not really. I mean, that would dissipate here soon. But we've had these issues before that law passed. We had these issues before the vision screening came into law. And granted, I agree with him. The vision screening is kind of dumb, and it, of course, was going to make the issue worse because you can either go pay an eye doctor to get a vision test and then do your renewal online, or you have to now go in person in order to get the free vision test. But it's not like the vision test takes that long. I've taken it recently. I don't know if you have. It's not that intensive, okay? They ain't optometrists doing it, all right? They are people from apparently a temporary staffing agency that for a cool $200 would have issued you a license as well. Reportedly, supposedly, allegedly. But come on. They're doing it. Allegedly. For $200. Which, funny enough, some people's eye exams were like $50, $100. So, I mean, if you're worried about failing, just pass them the $200. You've been fine. And the eye exam is dumb. It doesn't even make sense. The other day when I was renewing, I went in, I took the eye exam, I passed, of course, because with, glasses, I could see fine. Best at seeing. Nobody has ever seen as good as I see with glasses on. So I go in there, I pass the vision test. At the end of it, now I had like another 3 months left until my license expired. And I said to the lady that was doing the thing, I said, what if I failed the vision test? She's like, well, you could have gone to a doctor, gotten a vision test, and then filled out a form and brought that back, and then you could have gotten a license. I was like, yeah, but I still have 3 months left on my current license. Would you have taken that away? Would you have suspended my license? She's like, no, I wouldn't have. Like, you don't need to take your own vision test seriously. You're literally, I go in there, you're like, I don't know if you can see to drive, but just keep driving for a few more months. We'll get you on the back end. And so they're not even taking their vision test seriously. But why would he commit himself to literally doing the thing everybody hates? Like any other elected person, you think the incentive would be, yes, please. Who wants to be the one in charge of the DMV? It's like, who wants to be the elected person in charge of the IRS? Like if there's one solitary person in charge of the IRS, they would totally want to hand that off to somebody else. Like, yeah, make it that one elected guy's problem over there. I think that's a great idea. Because I don't want the negative press that comes from this. So why would he continue to want to do it? And this is what's so warped about some of these psychopathic politicians' minds. And yes, many of them are psychopaths by definition. They have to be. To pretend to do what they do, they got to be psychopaths. I'm telling you right now. The desire for power. You see, because if he hands off driver's licensing, that's less money. That's less staff. That's less control that he specifically has over your life. The government still has it, but he specifically has less staff, less control, less everything. On top of that, if he hands it off, well, he can't claim that it could be used against him as a failure. So he wants to say, no, I can fix this. I can do this. I want the power. And that's why all these politicians do what they do. Most of them are not running for office because they love you. They're not running for office because they have a whole lot of convictions to them. They're doing it for the sake of power. And when they end up losing power, deciding they don't want power anymore, it becomes about money. And after this, we'll be talking about how one politician has apparently sold his soul. A supposed conservative sold his soul in order for that sweet, sweet buck. In order to get his bread buttered. We'll have that after this short break. You're listening to Andrew Cooper Ryder.
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back here on this final segment of Kentucky's Voice. Host for the day, Andrew Cooper-Ryder. Now, on Sundays at 6 o'clock, you can listen to the Andrew Cooper-Ryder Show. My own, show, my own dedicated spot. I've been doing that for like 4 or 5 years or so, where I've been putting out a show myself at least once a week, if not more often than that. Shameless plug, you can listen to it right here on 970, Sundays at 6. Make sure you tune in. Anyways, this past show, I talked about Bob Hellringer. He's a former state House representative that is here out of Louisville. And at the time, he was known as a pretty conservative individual. In fact, when I called him out for his problems, his issues, in this past show that I did Sunday, once again, 6 o'clock on 970, shameless plug, once again. Are you tuning in? I'm just kidding. But anyways, when I did that, there was some pushback from people that were like, look, he's super conservative. Well, you don't know what you're talking about. Because it has come out that the Minnesota school shooter, shot up the Catholic church, was Bob Hellringer's nephew. And normally that wouldn't be something we'd bring up too much because, it's a familial relation. It's just his uncle. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. That doesn't reflect too much on Hellringer at all, except for this problem. You see, Hellringer has been an outspoken advocate, this super conservative. Everybody tells, oh, he's super conservative. And this just speaks, by the way, to Republicans as a whole. It's really easy to be that conservative guy in the room when Democrats can serve as your foil. When you're not being challenged on doing not super conservative, but standard conservative things. When you're not being challenged on that, it's easy to pretend to be whoever you want to be. But the minute you don't have that anymore, the minute it's time for you to do real work, the minute that you can't just play off the Democrats, a lot of times we start to find out who real people are. Because you see, over the past few years, Bob has once again become an outspoken advocate for transing the kids. In fact, this is from a hearing just 2 years ago in the Kentucky legislature, where Bob was testifying against a bill to stop the gender transitioning of children. Take a listen to what he had to say.
It's just distressing to me to see the amount of legislation, not just this bill, this pronoun bill, but bills in the House, House Bill 30, 58, 120, bathroom bills, conscience clause, so people don't have to treat transgender kids if they don't want to, can discriminate against them, what kind of treatment they can have or can't have. Why are we singling these people out? How many people are we talking about? How many transgender kids are there in the state that is so deserving of this kind of attention? Okay, that's pure discrimination. That's all this is. I would think the legislature has so much more to do in education than to have a pronoun law. I mean, I'm just reading this. Pronouns that do not conform to a student's biological sex as indicated on the student's original unedited birth certificate. Why is that any business of the General Assembly? Why don't let the schools handle this? Why not let the families handle this? But the General Assembly has to handle it. Haven't these kids had enough challenges? Then have the school have to say, I can't call you he or him. You're going to have to be her or she, because the state government said so. I think it's wrong.
Well, there you go. That sounds like a super conservative to me. Doesn't it to you? I mean, he's only in there advocating to transition children to let it happen. See, he doesn't understand. Why is it important to the state? Well, if the shooting in Minnesota teaches us anything, that's why it's important to the state that children aren't allowed to be the victims of abuse from messed up adults that think you can change your gender. Because when a child thinks they're born in the wrong body, when a human at all thinks they're born in the wrong body, they hate themselves, they hate their body, they want to change it. The response isn't to surgically fulfill their request. The response isn't to chop off body parts, build other body parts, and pump them full of the opposite sex's hormones. That's not mental health treatment. That's why there's a transgender violence issue in the country. A high rate of it. And people want to say, well, you know, it was white people before just shooting. The correlation is so much higher, and they barely track it. It's not until we see these kinds of stories that we start to realize and see, wow, this is like becoming an issue. And of course it is. It's an untreated mental health condition. That's why it's important to the state. That's why it's an issue. That's why this matters. Because those types of shootings, if children are getting proper mental health care, are completely preventable. And Bob is advocating to not give that to them. He's advocating instead to give them the kind of mental health care that leads to school shootings. That's the problem. That's why this is important. That's why the fact that his nephew, who identified as a girl, changed his name to Robin, shooting up a Catholic school matters to Bob's position. And you may wonder, well, you know, if Bob was so conservative, how did he end up in this position? How did he end up lost off the path so much? And it goes back to what I was saying. Most of these politicians are psychopaths. They can be paid to feel a certain way as well. Because you see, something that Bob probably won't publicly state is just from the Fairness Campaign here in Kentucky, for that testimony he just gave, selling out his virtues, using the fact that he's been known as a super conservative guy, he's standing against this. You know, you'd think if you look around and see that everyone who hated you before is now your friend, and everybody who was your friend before is now your enemy, you might realize you've changed fundamentally. You're doing something different. And what Bob won't say publicly, he won't announce this, is that the fairness campaign for that testimony, he's also, let alone what they paid him to be in ads and everything else, because he's also in ads in order to fight against these bills, to save children. I don't know what he's paid to be in, but he was in those ads. But we do know what he was paid to give testimony like that by the Fairness Campaign. And over the past few years, they've paid him $50,000. 50 grand. Yeah, boys getting paid. Paid to allow children to be abused. Hey, look, if you're going to sell your soul, don't sell it cheap. 50 grand's a pretty penny. You know, especially if you don't feel too strongly about it. I mean, take, for example, yourself, right? There might be an issue you don't feel too strongly about. I think a good example might be seatbelt laws. Let's go with. Personally, I don't quite understand how seatbelt laws are necessarily, I understand they prevent injury and accidents and everything else, but or injury to a person. But at the same time, the injury is seems very specified on that one person who decided not to wear the seatbelt. So I could see some issue there, but I don't feel strongly either way. It's not like I have some principle on seatbelts. You probably don't either. Now, let me ask you, if somebody comes to you and says, look, for 50 grand, hey, come out against seatbelts or come out for seatbelts. There's some laws coming down on it that we want to go ahead and advocate on. Would you do that for us for 50 grand? You too might be like, well, you know, I don't feel that strongly currently, but for 50 grand, I maybe could feel strongly about it for you. Boy's got to get paid. Got to get his bread buttered. He's got bills. But this isn't the kind, that's not a seatbelt law. We're talking about the children here. And it's funny because Bob is so well known as such a pro-life guy. But going back to what I said earlier, okay, so you're this pro-life guy, known as Mr. Pro-Life within the legislature, super conservative, supposedly. Yet all the people who wanted to murder babies and still want to murder babies are the ones paying you to talk about what's good or bad for children. And all the people who were right beside you trying to stop children from being murdered in the womb are there standing against what you had to say, what you're saying. They're on the other side of this issue. And you don't see anything wrong with this? Perhaps the people who literally were willing to murder kids in the womb don't have the best intentions in mind for the children. I know that may sound like a large leap for some of you, but perhaps that's just the case. Maybe he's not being fully honest there. And like I said, some of you may say, look, it's distasteful. You shouldn't be talking about this. This is a tragedy that occurred, making it political, blah, blah, blah. Look, I don't want these to continue to happen. And as long as people who others look up to as conservative can be paid 50 grand to advocate for the abuse in the form of gender-affirming care on children, are allowed to walk around with impunity and not be called out, not only for the hypocrisy, but the reasons why their beliefs and their desire to get their pocket lined leads to these types of incidents because they're not getting the care they need. And that's why I say he sold his soul. Obviously. On top of that, in that argument, it's funny. He says that wasn't in that video, but later on he said, well, what's next? Is the government going to tell them what to wear to schools or what schools are to teach? And on my show on Sunday, I mentioned it, and it's just stupid. That's such a stupid argument. You know that currently the state legislature is telling schools what to teach. And you know there's dress policies at all these schools in the first place. And when you start hearing a person that otherwise you think might be intelligent lay out really dumb, stupid arguments in support of bad policy, that's a good indication they're being paid. because nobody's that dumb. They're looking for something. They're like, oh my gosh, I want the 50 grand, but I got to find a reason to go ahead and support this. What do I say? What do I say? What do I say? What are you going to do? Tell them what to teach next? Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on Kentucky's Voice. We will see you back here tomorrow. Hope you have a great rest of your day.